Hello friends, I hope you are in the best of your spirits as always and consistently preparing for your upcoming exam. Like the other videos of this series, let us take 10 questions and learn little more of system of governance in India, which you all aspire to become a part of very soon. It will be beneficial if you keep your copy of the Constitution of India close by for reference as we move along. I also recommend you please pause the video as the question is displayed, answer the question yourself first and only then proceed to listen. You'll make the best of it only then. And continuing from the last video, on the right hand side you will see some pictures of personalities who have been awarded the Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian award of India. Your task is to identify these personalities while you listen to the explanation. Lastly, there is always some additional learning at the end of the video, like most of the times it's just random information but relevant for our studies and life. So I strongly suggest to complete this video. Even if you wish to skip some part of my talk here, do watch it till the end by skipping, or much better option of increasing the speed. But yes, watch it till the end. Alright, so let's take the first question here, and that is, which of the following statements is or are not correct regarding the Prevention of Child Marriage Act 2006? Now, this has come in light of the recent announcement by the Prime Minister of India on the Independence Day that the government is considering the committee's recommendations regarding increasing the marriageable age of girls and making it at par with the boys. So in that context, last video, remember, we had a question on Sharda Act. So in that, we know that Sharda Act actually has been now repealed by the Prevention of Child Marriages Act of 2006. So in this regard, there are two options given to us here. And the first option says a male adult above 18 years of age who contracts a child marriage is punishable under the Act. Of course, it is a punishable offence. That's what is the purpose of the Child Marriage Act. Now the reverse, a female adult above 18 years of age who contracts a child marriage is not punishable under the Act. This is also correct. Actually, both the statements are correct. So this is where, you might be questioning that why is it not gender neutral, and, why men can be punished but not women. See, of course, laws are always created in the context of a society, and we all know the kind of society we are, the amount of gender equality actually that is there in those communities of our society, those parts of our society where child marriage is still prevalent, right? You might be very gender neutral in your thought, may not be also, right? Superficially, we all feel we are, but that part of our society where there is still a prevalence of child marriage, the status of women, consider that, and then you'll be at peace with, why these kind of provisions are there. In fact, recently in Punjab, there was some incident I was reading online, you can also search on that, where a 17-year-old boy married an adult female, and she was, I think, 21 plus. So the prosecution was started against the boy also. However, the court intervened that you cannot punish the minor. There's nothing that can be punished to the minor. However, in that case, nothing can be done to the female also, who's an adult. Anyway, read more on that yourself if you wish to, and see, again, we need to improve on our learning of these kind of provisions which are related to current affairs. Okay, that gentleman, by the way, Mr. Subramaniam, he was the Minister of Food and Agriculture when the Green Revolution, Mr. Swaminathan and Norman Borlaug, all those people, the minister in charge was Mr. Subramaniam. He got Bharat Ratna. Okay, then next question is, which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the Constituent Assembly of India? Okay, let's see. No decision of the Constituent Assembly required division of votes. Absolutely correct. All the decisions were taken by voice vote, and that is why it can be said that the decisions were unanimous, because division was never held. But yes, voting by voice vote did happen. Second statement says the method of election to elect the representatives from the provincial assemblies was proportional representation and single transfer vote. It's a matter of fact, I'm sure you know that it is a correct statement. And the seats in each province were distributed among it was 3 categories only. There is no separate category called Hindus. It was Muslims, Sikhs, and of course, what is left is general. So 1 and 2 are the correct statements. Nothing extraordinary here. It's just a matter of factual knowledge and memory. I am very sure you recognized the gentleman on the right hand side, another Bharat Ratna awardee. Oh, well, hardly 1/4. By the way, this video I realized while I was just quickly looking at all the The performance is that this has been a slightly, I don't know why difficult, but not well performed. Except one or two questions, we have not touched even 50% of the people marking the answer, getting it right, and mostly it is in 20 and 30%. So, all right. Next question is, which of the following factors are generally considered as possible advantages of the presidential form of government? Faster decision making, of course, because essentially it is to do with the separation of power between the executive and the legislature, and that is a complete separation of power. So not you don't have to go through the entire legislative process all the time and get approvals, and also there is no concept of a collective responsibility and collective decision making. It is the president is the boss, the president takes decisions. So yes, definitely this is an advantage. However, in some cases it becomes dilatory because many of the decisions of the president may require approval of the legislature, let's say in the US, the US Congress. However, this is a general, possible advantages. So yes, this is an advantage. Less prominent party divisions, absolutely. If you have read any kind of analytical piece on presidential and parliamentary systems, you'll see that party loyalty is not really that major an issue, at least after one has been elected president. Because then you get that safety of term, and at the same time the members of the legislature, they don't have to vote as per the party lines, because their vote does not affect the presidency as such. Whereas, let's say in India, even after somebody has become prime minister, they need continued support of the party. They need to toe the party line. They need to think as with the party, right? You cannot separate Narendra Modi and Bharatiya Janata Party. You cannot separate Rahul Gandhi and Congress, even though they become prime minister or no matter what. So it is kind of a lot interdependence is there, and of course it is to do with the basic fact of the separation between executive and legislature. Higher role of experts in the government, absolutely, because we know that ministers otherwise in parliamentary system must be a member of the legislature, whereas in the presidential system there is much more freedom. In fact, in the US system, even the bureaucracy, the top bureaucracy, 15%, is for political appointments. I mean, imagine that kind of a system in India, how maybe misuse or abuse of the system, or at least allegations of misuse and abuse will be seen. So anyway, in this all of them are correct, all 1, 2 and 3. So moving on to the next question, and this is one where 2/3 got it right, so that's good. So next question is, which of the following statements is or are not correct regarding the governor of a state in India? In case of a vacancy in the office of governor, appointment has to be made within a period of 6 months. Now, nonsense, right? Why do you need 6 months? It's not an elected post. It's an appointed post. The appointment can be done immediately. So the constitution doesn't say anything. The understanding is that it should be immediate. Even if the governor, you are not able to find someone, then usually what happens, then a neighboring state's governor is given the charge. We all know that a governor can be a governor for more than one state. Second statement says that unlike the President of India, who is an integral part of Union Parliament, governor is not an integral part. Even if you don't know anything, governor is almost like a mirror image of the president. Also in Article 168, it very clearly says, there's nothing to debate here. Governor is also an integral part of the state legislature. We had earlier one question where we saw that the US president is not part of the US legislature, whereas the Indian president is, so is Indian governor. Let's see if you actually understand what it means. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this question here, that what does it mean if somebody is integral part of the legislature or not? Because president, anyway, in USA or India, they give assent to the bills passed by the parliament or US Congress anyway. But what does it mean that if somebody is part of the legislature or not? Think, ponder. Someday maybe I'll take it up through one of the videos. I think I did discuss it when we saw that question of president. Anyhow, that's Mr. Mokshagandham Vishvesvaraya. I'm sure you have heard his name. Read more. We move on to the next question, and that is, which of the following is or are not essential features for cooperative federalism to be fostered in a country? I'm sure you understand cooperative federalism. It's largely a phrase in English. but the meaning is pretty much what you read here. So it says no disputes between states or between center and states. Now at an outset it may look like an obvious thing, but see, it's not about no fights or no disputes. It's like family of children. Just that this family has 28, 29 children. So the children will fight. You do fight with your brother and sister and cousins and everybody else, but the point is you still decide to live together. You are one family. So it's not no disputes, it's dispute resolution mechanism must be there, right? How do we resolve the disputes? Is there a third party who's going to be neutral in their dispute? So it's not that we will not have disputes. In fact, if there is a country and there is a federal country, of course disputes will be there. Then it says no disputes between state level political parties and national political parties. This is nonsense option I just created because I thought I should have third option also. So it is not possible to not have disputes. Disputes will always be there in your life. Also remember, conflict is natural. Don't run away from conflict. I know naturally as humans we want to run away, we don't want to become part of conflict, but remember, conflict is what improves us. Only when there is, let's say, inner conflict in you, there is a conflict with your friends, just face it, right? Become a person who can take that conflict head on and resolve it. Running away from conflict is not a great idea. Anyway, third point says federalism as a means to achieve welfare of people. It sounds good also, and it is definitely a correct option. That's the idea, that if, let's say, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka are fighting for water, one, we should have legal mechanisms to resolve that. But if they both have this spirit that ultimately Karnataka as well as Tamil Nadu, they both want welfare of the people, and not just people like Tamil people or Malayali people, it is people, right? Or Kannada people. They are willing to share with each other, right? So they see the bigger purpose of why we are doing something. It's not the end in itself, right? Federalism, it's a means to achieve a bigger goal. Anyway, I'm very sure you recognized Bacha Khan, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. I'm very sure you recognized him. If you did not, or if you did anyway, read more about him. I'm sure you have read anyway in history. Next question is, what constitutes a session of Lok Sabha? I thought it's a straightforward question. And I thought that this time we'll break all our records and cross 90% correct, but that just somehow doesn't happen. See, what is a session? It is essentially the period from the time the president summons till the time the president prorogues, right? In between, you can have recesses, you can have breaks and sittings and adjournments, and even adjournment sine die. The speaker announces, let's say, or the chairman of the Rajya Sabha announces sine die. Sine die, it simply means that the sitting has been adjourned without any further date of sitting. The house is still in session. It can be convened for some matter, but once the president prorogues, and that's the logical sequence, that adjournment sine die followed by prorogue by the president, then the session is over. Okay, so that's how you define a session. Half of you only got it right. Well, next question we have: which of the following statements is or are not? I think why this performance is not that great in this series is because I have put a lot of questions where it says are not, and people do ignore that word unknowingly. So which are not correct regarding the committees of the Lok Sabha. First statement says the quorum to constitute a sitting of a committee shall be nearly 1/3 of the total membership of the committee. This is absolutely correct. This is precisely the language also, nearly 1/3. In Rajya Sabha, actually it is not like that. In Rajya Sabha, the rules, if you see, you don't have to see really, I'm there for that. So in Rajya Sabha, what happens is that every committee has got its own specified quorum. So they will say some committee will have 5, some committee will have 7, some committee will have whatever. In Lok Sabha, it simply has one rule that approximately 1/3 should be there. Whereas normally for the House, we know it is 10% of the members. Then it says if the chairperson of a committee is absent from any sitting, the speaker shall appoint another member to act as the chairperson. No, why? What business speaker has here? See, if a chairperson is not there, they are they are not able to perform the duty, then the speaker comes in. But if they are just absent, Speaker has no role. Speaker doesn't have this business to see which committee is sitting today, who is having a meeting, which chairman is not there. That's not Speaker's job. Speaker is a very important person and very busy person also. So in that situation, what happens? The committee, the members of the committee, they choose one of themselves to preside over that one sitting only, right? So, well, I mean, the answer is second is not correct because the first one is correct. The question is asking not correct. And I hope you recognized Mr. Ramachandran there. And look at the performance here again, I don't know. I think you got confused between, not correct and correct. Anyhow, be careful. Whatever it is, we need to perform better. So, the next question we have is, which of the following states has been taken as the benchmark for per capita GSDP, gross state domestic product, by the 15th Finance Commission for 2021, whereby all other states get their share based on how distant their per capita GSDP is from the benchmark. So it's basically saying that who's the benchmark, and every other state will get their share based on how distant they are. So more the distance, their share is more. Lesser the distance, lesser is the share that they will get. This is what is the criteria called income distance. In one of the previous videos, we have seen, what are the criteria for deciding the horizontal distribution among the states. Now, this is a question where actually the answer is the unexpected one, and that's why I see the performance. See, the highest per capita GSDP in our country is of the state of Goa, and the second is Sikkim. So the 15th Finance Commission, and not 15th Finance Commission, you'll see several Finance Commissions earlier, it has been consistent like this. In fact, the top three and in the top four, Haryana, and the fourth one is Himachal Pradesh. They have always been there. So Goa and Sikkim, they're not a representative of to say a typical Indian state, because one is a hilly area, one is a tourist destination, the size is small. So the Finance Commission decides not, and the difference is huge. The difference is huge between these. So they say, no, we'll not use it. We'll use Haryana. So Haryana has consistently been the benchmark. It's like saying that if all my states have to have a per capita GSDP like Haryana, what is the gap that I have to fulfill? That is what Finance Commission recommends. So I have to make everybody at the same level of Haryana per capita GSDP. So that's a very, very good thing, to see how we are trying to pull up all our states together. So the question arises that, okay, does it mean Haryana will not get anything? And what about Goa and Sikkim? So what happens there is that the fourth state, Himachal Pradesh, that means the GSDP difference between Haryana and Himachal Pradesh, that is the amount which Himachal Pradesh gets, is the same amount which will also be given to all the top three states also. So essentially the top four states, they all get the same share, and everybody else gets a share based on the distance that is there from Haryana. Anyway, that's Pandit Ravi Shankar. So let's move on to the next question, and that is, which of the following statements are correct regarding the Bharat Ratna? The entire series of this video and the last video has been on some important Bharat Ratna awardees, not all of them, of course. Let's see, the number of annual awards is restricted to a maximum of 2 in a particular. No, that is 3. Then the recommendations for the award are made by the Prime Minister to the President. Absolutely correct. The Prime Minister personally, Narendra Modi himself, would be recommending, or whoever is the Prime Minister. A person who's not a citizen of India may be awarded Bharat Ratna. Absolutely correct. You see the photograph of the gentleman there, and other people also in the previous previous slides. You remember that, I hope. Wow, good exercise. Actually find out who all foreigners were given or awarded Bharat Ratna. And the fourth one says the recipient is allowed to use Bharat Ratna as a prefix to their name. Absolutely wrong. We all know Article 18 of Constitution of India prohibits a state from conferring any title. So remember, state cannot confer. You and I can confer anything to each other, right? So state is the one who's giving or awarding Bharat Ratna. So definitely it cannot be used as a title. So this is actually not correct. The second and third statements are correct. First and fourth are wrong. And I am sure you recognized Mandela ji. Okay, the last question for this video. Which of the following statements are correct regarding the various proclamations made by the President of India? Okay, these are regarding the different emergencies or provisions we have in Part 18 of the Constitution. First one says the proclamation under Article 352, which is national emergency, is valid for a period of 1 month. Absolutely correct. Proclamation under 356, President's rule, is valid for 2 months. Absolutely correct. Proclamation under 360, which is valid for 2 months. That is also absolutely correct. Remember, the proclamation is always valid for 1 and 2 and 2 months. Basically 352 is for 1 month. Originally this was also 2 months, but after the 44th amendment it has been made 1 because 2 they said is too much, whereas 356 and 360 are still the original ones. Also, once the parliament approves, right, then it gets extended for 6 months. In the case of Article 352, we have seen this question earlier, that in the case of national emergency, the 6-month period is from the date of proclamation. That means it's not date of proclamation, from the date of approval. So it effectively becomes 6 plus 1 equal to 7 months. Now, whereas in 356, the President's rule, the 6-month period is calculated from the proclamation itself. That means it is effectively 6 months only. That means if on the last date, that is end of the 2-month period, it is passed, then it will remain valid for 4 more months, effectively just 6 months. And similar is the condition for 360. There actually there is no end period. It remains valid till infinity, till it is revoked. Again, that is the original provision in the Constitution. Anyway, read all these things carefully. That's how these provisions have been designed. So we move on to the next question. Sorry, there's no next question. We move on to the last end lesson, the last slide. So last time, remember, I told you Peter's principle. So this time, very similar. I've got for you Parkinson's law. E. Northcote Parkinson, very interesting, analysis. He was doing a research on the British Empire towards the, Second World War, end of Second World War, where the empire was consolidating. It was reducing in size, and he found that while the empire is shrinking, the bureaucratic setup is expanding. The work is reducing, but the paraphernalia is expanding, kind of perpetually expanding. So this is how we reflect it on a graph. If you can understand that, no matter how much time is available, the work will keep expanding. And this is a typical behavior, right? Even in the preparation phase, I just saw that many people, they wasted a lot of their time, and they know they have wasted. Yeah, some genuine cases are there. They have really suffered, I understand, because of COVID. But a lot of people I have seen, they have just wasted their time, and now they expected extension, and after that the extension has been given, they are expecting the exam to be delayed, which is not going to happen most likely. We have seen what has happened to NEET and other kind of JEE exams. The Supreme Court has rejected those kind of petitions. So this is a typical behavior. Remember, if you get extra time, this is not an exam where you are preparing for 1 year and 2 years. So if you get 2 months or 4 months extra, you're going to do any extra wonder. It is what you do during the whole year, not in the last 1 or 2 days or 5 days or 10 days. It doesn't matter what you do. Sleep for last 5 days, it's okay. But your effort for the 1 year, last 10 months, 8 months, that long period of effort, that is what will give you results. That is what destiny will bring you results. And that's why I always say consistency is more important. It's not an overnight, a stroke of luck that you can expect in this exam. So anyhow, on that note, I'll leave you with that, and I'll see you very soon with 10 more questions. We are touching 500, and that will be the end of all this series of videos. We'll start another project after that. So thank you very much. See you next time. All the best.